From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
These horses were so important to our people, our ancestors.
A rare horse breed thought almost extinct, making a comeback. How does this sound? Cotton as food.
It can potentially feed 500 to 600 million people per year.
And our top story, it's back to the bargaining table when it comes to the U.S. making trade deals.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The Trump administration working to maintain momentum on the trade front, announcing fresh plans to start work on 3 new bilateral agreements. The U.S. Trade Representative's office announcing it will start formal trade deal talks with the EU, Japan, and the U.K. Now, some of those negotiations could start in a few months. The talks with the U.K. would happen not long after it leaves the EU. Under fast-track rules, the U.S. can't start trade talks until 90 days after notifying Congress. Now, farm groups chiming in on the news, saying new trade negotiations, especially with Japan, remain vital to opening new markets.
We need export markets if we aren't going to continue to shrink cow numbers and farms over time. So I would think that bilateral, trilateral, multilateral negotiations with other countries is going to be a good thing and something that the dairy industry would push for.
The U.S. administration must also provide what it hopes to achieve with the talks 30 days before they start. If you thought the new trade deal with Canada and Mexico would get quick approval, think again. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell telling Bloomberg a vote on the USMCA won't happen until next year. McConnell saying, quote, "My trade advisors say you can't possibly do it under the various steps that we have to go through. But waiting until next year for Congress to approve it could set up a battle with Democrats if the party wins a majority in the House in the midterm elections next month."
The deal right now, the way it appears, is going to take roughly 6 months to be fully enacted. So by the time we look at the first big piece of this new arrangement, it's going to be roughly a year before we really see that go away. And so the timeline is critical as we talk about what will happen to price.
Some interesting results in our new Farm Journal Pulse survey. The question, will President Donald Trump influence your vote in the midterm elections? 26% said no, 62% said yes, they would vote Republican to support the president. Another 11% said yes, that they would vote Democrat. 919 people took part in the unscientific smartphone study. Farmers may be waiting on a new farm bill, but current safety net payments are out from USDA. The Ag Department issuing nearly $5 billion to producers through its agricultural risk coverage, price loss coverage, and the Conservation Reserve Program. About $3 billion of that will come from the ARC and PLC programs for that 2017 crop year. $1.8 billion will go to annual rental payments under CRP. Chinese officials calling for greater oversight of large-scale pig farms. That's after another outbreak of African swine fever. Reuters reporting China's vice agriculture minister is making the call. China's reported close to 40 separate outbreaks of the deadly disease since early August. The latest concern came after a 20,000 head pig farm reported an outbreak earlier this week. China banning the transport right now of live hogs from provinces that have reported outbreaks. Reuters says a dozen additional cases have also been reported this week. The scope of Hurricane Michael's fury becoming clear 1 week after the storm hit the Florida Panhandle, becoming the most powerful hurricane to hit the U.S. in nearly 50 years. Emergency management officials say thousands of people remain without power in an 11-county region that stretches from the Gulf of Mexico to the Georgia border. Vice President Pence and his wife Karen touring farms affected by Hurricane Michael. Pence spoke with farmers about the impact of the devastation. He visited an animal feed company and a pecan grove. We've been telling you that farmers say damage to pecan trees, for example, in southwest Georgia, will be felt for generations.
This represents generational loss to see these 4-year-old pecan trees down right about the time that they were getting close to producing, taking 10 years to get all the way back. And I just want to assure you that we get it. We need to do more.
A new study finds that over the past few decades, tornadoes have shifted. They're decreasing in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, but winding up in more states along the Mississippi River and further east. Scientists aren't quite certain why. The study comes from the journal Climate and Atmospheric Science. It sees a slight decrease in tornado activity in the Great Plains, with the biggest drop in central and eastern Texas Even with the decline, Texas still gets the most tornadoes of any state. And in parts of Texas, the rain just hasn't stopped. Downpours have led to widespread flooding that's inundated homes and caused bridges to collapse. The governor of Texas declaring a state of emergency in 18 counties. The state experts warning people who live along the Llano and Colorado rivers not to be fooled by the rapid drop in water levels, because they say the water levels on rivers will rise again, and they warn it will happen quickly. The Llano River is about an hour north of Austin. It's cresting at near record levels. The weather getting better for harvest in portions of Iowa after several days of slowdown due to that weather, but they're not alone in the battle against Mother Nature. Cindy Clausen joining us with more in today's Crop Comments.
We know some folks in the U.S. haven't been able to get into the fields because of rain or snow, but look at this picture shared on Twitter by Ignatius Barnard. This was taken in southern Alberta, Canada. Now, apparently those combines have been parked for more than 30 days, and you can see why. Take a look at the snow. It's expected, though, that those machines will be out and running over the next few days. Let's take a look at the wind forecast as we head through the next 24 to 36 hours. It's going to be a little on the breezy side in the far northeastern United States over in New England. But as we put this into motion, notice how the winds will start to pick up in the Great Lakes and in the Plains states as we head into this afternoon. Overnight, we start to see those winds picking up in the upper Midwest and continuing in the Great Lakes. But watch what happens as we head through Friday, and they really start picking up in the northern plains there and even on through the Great Lakes area. I'll have your national forecast coming up in just a few minutes, but for now, here are some hometown temps.
You normally can't eat cottonseed. That's because they have a toxin in them that's harmful to both people and animals. But researchers at Texas A&M AgriLife Research may have found a way to feed people those seeds by removing the toxin. Researchers creating a new cottonseed variety that can be eaten, ground into flour, or even made into a peanut butter-like spread. By the way, this new cotton plant can still be used as a fiber.
With the toxin removed from the cottonseed, it can potentially feed 500 to 600 million people per year. I've spent 23 years working on this project. A lot of poor countries grow cotton as a cash crop, and they also suffer from malnutrition. Imagine the goodwill it will generate around the world, saying this technology came from Texas A&M and we are sharing it with the world.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture has given the green light for the research to move forward. The next step after inspections by USDA is approval from the FDA, and then it's on to commercialization. Crops in the field and in the bin may be worth money, but at some point the farm's going to need cash. We'll talk about managing cash flow next at the Agribusiness Desk, and later see why lovers of these rare horses have reason to celebrate this white stallion.
AgDay, brought to you by Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers. They don't just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize it, so crops deliver the max in return. Learn more at maxinmaxout.com.
In agribusiness, another mixed day in markets. Let's get those trading day details from our friends on the floor.
Today, soybeans firmed up. It seems like they've stabilized a little bit. They're awaiting a little bit more news to trying to give the market some direction. But after that initial rally a couple of days ago, the market is actually holding pretty strong in this area. Now, corn was steady today. It seems like it's consolidating right now as we await real actual yield numbers. Exports are still pretty strong overall, but it's in a slower phase right now, and I think that's why we stalled out a little bit. Wheat pulled back today. Exports are uncertain, and it seems that that's pressuring the futures right now. Cattle was mixed. The beef exports are up, so you thought there would be a little bit of firmness in there, but the cash cattle trade is very slow. Beef prices are sagging somewhat, and that's kind of putting some pressure on the market. There is some short covering, and that's adding to some of the support, and that's why we got a little bit of a mixed bag today. Interestingly enough, as feeders were kind of weak today, and I wonder if that's where we're going, and their trend is still lower, and it has been lower for the past couple of weeks, and it kind of diverged from the live cattle contract, and it has a lot of traders concerned. That's all from the floor at the CME Group here in Chicago. I'm Virginia McGathy.
Money and cash flow are major concerns for farmers every year. Tyne Morgan talks about managing cash in today's analysis.
Here now with Steve Johnson of Iowa State University. Steve, I know you've done some case studies, and most recently you've been doing a case study with producers to see which producers are kind of faring better than others in the midst of these economic headwinds. What is the key?
A general description is it's a producer that's managing risk. They know their cost. They're calculating cost of production early, probably February or March. They're using crop insurance, revenue protection, their pre-harvest marketing. And in most cases, they sold 50 to 90% of their 18 corn and soybeans ahead. So they've managed the futures price risk. I think basis will be a challenge for them, but we've got large carries in the market. So they'll likely roll those hedges or those HTA contracts into that May or July period to be able to capture a large carry, almost 30 cents on corn and over 50 cents on soybeans from harvest till July. So again, I think there's places that we can fine tune a farming operation, but knowing your cost, knowing your cash flow needs, and managing futures price risks.
Managing those future price risks, how essential is that going to be when you go in and have a conversation with your lender to show them that you actually took advantage of some of those higher prices and did something versus it did nothing? You know, how is that going to be vital for some of these conversations coming up?
I think besides yield variability this year, I think the separation of farms are going to be those that pre-harvest marketed at least 50% of the crop and those that didn't. And there's a lot of farmers out there that did a good job of pre-harvest marketing. Again, for the last 6 years, it paid to pre-harvest market corn and soybeans.
All right, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll take a quick break and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen here looking at the map, and really the rain in Texas is the biggest feature here. Boy, after a dry start, some of those areas getting quite a bit of rain.
Yeah, it's almost like the faucet won't shut off now, and we tend to see that sometimes. You'll get a drought and then all of a sudden you get the rain and then just like, okay, enough already. Let's spread it out a little bit. And we have more rain coming to much of the western parts of the Gulf Coast states, Texas especially. You're going to be seeing a fair amount of rain today. While we have high pressure and control of a lot of the Corn Belt, that may allow some of those producers that have been too wet to actually maybe get some work done in the fields. Stationary front across the Gulf Coast states, but a lot of us dry except for kind of the southern plains and into the southwest where we have some rain and upper elevation snow. As we head through the day, high pressure spreads to the eastern Corn Belt. We'll see some sunshine there, but temperatures still remain cool in a lot of the country. Overnight, we're going to be looking at that rain continuing for parts of Texas, especially as you can see that moisture really streaming up from the Gulf Coast, Texas on into Oklahoma as well. And through the day on Friday, we're going to continue that rain, especially in parts of north central Texas and southern Oklahoma. We'll see a cold front starting to come through Friday, and we'll start to see a little bit of moisture with that heading into the Great Lakes and into parts of the eastern Corn Belt. All right, let's take a look at the precipitation. Now, this is the past 24 hours, and you can see that focus really has been on Texas, almost right there in central Texas with 1 to 2 inches. But watch what happens when we add the next 24 hours, and we really see that rain adding up. So over the next couple of days, then we're looking at another 2 to 3 inches between what we've already seen and then adding on the next 24 hours. Man, it is just wet there, so we really could use a break. Well, let's take a look at temperatures. As I mentioned, a lot of the country is seeing below normal temperatures. Not really frigid, not too far below normal, but just we've been on a cool streak. And we're going to continue to see a lot of 40s and 50s, kind of in the northeastern quadrant of the country. We do see some slightly warmer air here in some of the northern plains. As we get into the overnight hours, we'll start to see those temperatures dipping down into the 30s again. A lot of 30s and 40s, even some 50s across the nation's midsection. The only real warm area is kind of down in Florida. Heading into your Friday, we're looking at temperatures, again, a lot of the country in the 40s and 50s for highs, with just the real warm air remaining very far to the south. Over the next week or so, as we take a look at the jet stream, we still have that trough in the northeastern United States, kind of a ridge, but we've got still that kind of cutoff low. That's what's been helping to bring some of that rain in parts of the southwestern United States. Ridge will move through, but another trough in the eastern part of the country. And then, unlike yesterday where our model was showing a big ridge moving across the east, it becomes more zonal flow, or the central part of the country, more zonal flow. So we don't see a real relief from the real cool temperatures that we've been seeing in a good part of especially the eastern half of the country. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Carlin, Nevada, abundant sunshine for you today with a high of 64 degrees. Maysville, Oklahoma, cloudy with some showers, a high of 59 degrees. And Brightwood, Virginia, sunny and cooler with a high of 54.
Still ahead, livestock haulers want more time behind the wheel. Why they're calling for the change next. Three head of cattle in northwestern Wyoming have brucellosis. Drovers reporting the herd is located in Park County. That is in the Wyoming brucellosis designated surveillance area. The infected herd currently under quarantine. The bacterial disease can cause cattle, elk, and bison to abort pregnancies, and it often happens late term. Since 1988, all of Wyoming's cases were determined to have come from infected wildlife. Now, a large portion of Yellowstone National Park is in Park County, and there are large populations of wild bison and elk there. Some livestock groups want more drive time hours for haulers. A petition was filed with the Department of Transportation. It was created by groups representing bee, fish, and livestock haulers. Currently, drive time is limited to 11 hours with a 14-hour on-duty limit. The petitioners would like to see drivers have up to 15 hours of drive time and 16 hours on duty. That would follow a 10-hour consecutive rest period. They say the current rules weren't drafted with livestock haulers in mind and don't account for the unique character of their loads and place the well-being of livestock at risk. A longtime beef plant now under court-ordered receivership. Kane Beef in Corpus Christi, Texas, has been in business for more than 60 years. Drovers reporting Kane Beef owes millions to cattle ranchers and other creditors. The receivership will allow the company time to cut costs and keep the business going until a buyer or investor is found.
According to court documents released this week, Kane Beef is now under the control of former bankruptcy judge Richard Smith, who said his job is to reorganize the business. He said a priority will be to make sure the cattle feeders are paid. Kane Beef procures cattle from approximately 30 Texas feed yards.
Kane Beef employs 750 people. The company supplies meat across the country and is the 10th largest beef plant in the nation, killing roughly 270,000 cattle annually. Coming up, keeping history going, how this rare breed of horses is making a comeback in the country.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. See the hardest working tractors in ag at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
A stallion in southwest Mississippi is bringing new blood to a rare strain of horses brought to America by Spanish explorers. Choctaw horses were bred in the deep south by Choctaw Indians and then thought to be long gone, but they're now making a comeback. These sheep, cattle, and horses, thriving on what looks like any other farm, are actually extraordinary and very rare. Descendants of Spanish colonial era, their ancestors were brought to America by Spanish conquistadors and bred in the deep south by Choctaw Indians.
When they first started using them, they used them as pack animals. So they literally, they took them on hunting trips. Of course, the women were responsible for processing the meat and all that, but instead of carrying it on their backs, they now could carry it on the horses.
Used for generations by ranchers to herd cattle and for transportation, the horse's ties to the Native Americans run deep.
One of the uses slowly became that when the child was too big to be carried on its mother's back or on a pouch in the front, they would literally strap them to the horse. And at 5, when they were too big, they were expert horsemen.
Choctaw horses were thought to be long gone from the deep south, expelled along with the Indians in forced migration to Oklahoma. That became known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands of horses died on the journey, were traded or lost. Today, their numbers are in the low hundreds, making this blue-eyed white stallion a surprising find in Mississippi. DNA testing proving the horse DeSoto is Choctaw, a thrill for members of the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma.
These horses were so important to our people, our ancestors.
Breeding DeSoto with mares from Oklahoma has led to the birth of 6 foals this year, diversifying the gene pool with the first new DNA for the Oklahoma horses in a century and continuing a family legacy for the Mississippi farmer raising DeSoto. The homestead and range have been in Bill Brown's family since 1881, and the livestock even longer.
I want to keep it going, And it's just, I guess you call it a family tradition, you know.
The mares selected as the best genetic matches for DeSoto were brought to Mississippi last year, and some of the offspring will remain there to keep the Choctaw horses galloping for generations to come. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.